Before we get into this exciting episode of Magic Hour podcast, I'm here to give a little shout out / reminder to sign up for Earth Angel Club Pisces season. If you're interested or called, Earth Angel Club is a beautiful monthly gathering where I go over the astrology of the current zodiac season. I do an energy reading for the group. I do a guided meditation. This one will be angelic healing with Archangel Michael, which is going to be so powerful and so needed. And then I give some ritual guidance for creating magic in this time period. So there's just so much to go over, so much happening astrologically. I hope you'll join us. It is Thursday, February 27th at 6 p.m. Pacific, but the replay is available to anybody who can't make it live. If you're craving some extra guidance, some extra self-care for the soul, and want to be around some beautiful, like-minded people, please join us. I cannot wait to connect with you. And you can sign up at angelsandamethyst.com. Welcome back to Magic Hour, beautiful hummingbirds. I'm your host, Taylor Page.
And I'm Claire. Thank you so much for joining us.
I feel like right now is this moment, really since the end of last year into now, where, spaciousness was my key word for this year. And it's been so nice to create more spaciousness. And something that I'm really leaning into is not trying to make things that aren't fitting fit. That is creating more spaciousness for me too. For example, this is such a small story, but I was at this shopping mall in Italy that was this outlet mall. And there was this sense of, oh my gosh, such beautiful stuff, such good deals. Like, I have to make something fit. I have to make something work. But nothing was really resonating with me, or I wasn't really feeling it. And it was just an interesting time to witness, like, when my ego says, make something fit, put something in this space, make it work, force something. And then my higher self was like, nothing is really feeling like a full body yes. And so I feel like in this moment energetically, we've been trying to fit these circles into square pegs for a while, and I'm just really not interested in doing that anymore. I'm not interested in debating, convincing, begging, pleading, changing myself to fit. I'm truly in this moment where I'm embracing spaciousness. And say, for example, that shopping analogy, like you want to buy something just because it's a sale, and you're like, oh my gosh, it's a sale. Like, I have to, like, this shirt's kind of cute. Yeah. And it's a sale, so I should get it. That's just an example, but then you'll never wear that shirt. Like, you just have that shirt in your closet because you talked yourself into getting it because it's a sale. That's the energetics of this moment that I'm feeling personally. Just because my mind thinks I should be doing something doesn't mean it feels right. And I think we're shifting into like, what feels right and what doesn't, even if it doesn't make sense or logical sense or fit into the systems we've been indoctrinated into. If it's not feeling right, I'm not doing it.
Yes, I'm so here for that, Taylor. I think that's so powerful. And, it's like on the mundane level with something like shopping. And then, like, on big scales, I've been really navigating that with relationships and friendships and people that are in my life and no longer feel in resonance with me. And I think that can be such a tricky thing because there can be like a lot of self doubt around I'm not being a good person if I'm not making space for absolutely everybody who maybe wants me in their life or thinks they deserve to spend my time with them or whatever. And I think that can feel like wrong to say, you know what, I'm not feeling in resonance with this relationship and I don't have to create space for it then. And that doesn't make me a bad person. And that doesn't make the other person necessarily bad. It's just being true to what I want to fill the precious space that I have of my life with.
Yeah. And I think when we keep things that aren't a full body yes, or that might be too harsh, because if things aren't a full body yes, we can start to explore why that is. And there might be ways to shift things or shift boundaries that make it a full body yes. So I don't want to be as black and white as that. But if we keep things that aren't working, even after we try to make them work or see how we can shift or explore it, and they're still not working, they're still draining our energy, that's truly rooted in scarcity consciousness. And that pattern is going to play out in every single area of life, because you're basically telling the universe in a subconscious way, I don't trust that something better will fill this space. I believe I have to hold on to something so tightly that isn't right. And it feels so scary on the nervous system regulation way, because there's two very distinct sides to us. There's the part of us that's our soul that knows that love is all there is and that everything is possible, but we're also human beings with these systems like our nervous system in place to try to protect ourselves. We're very communal and we have generations of ancestors who had to live through really brutal stuff. So here we are with this juxtaposition of our spiritual knowledge, but also the very real survival instincts. And it's funny, I was just hanging out with Jessica Gill from Expanded Podcast last night, and we were talking about how brutal nature is and how that sort of brutalism of not only nature but human nature and animals. She has these like pack of coyotes at her house. I feel like the volume is being turned up on like the brutal side of humanity that we've been disconnected from, and the brutal side of nature, because we're so comfortable now. Our survival instincts come up in like scarcity consciousness and people pleasing, and it's like a new generation of tactics for survival. But that brutality still exists in nature, and we're a part of nature. We can DoorDash food to ourselves, and we have basically all of our needs met in a way that most of our ancestors didn't. And we're very fortunate to be living situations where our needs are met. So I'm speaking about the majority. Of course, not everybody around the world has that luck. There's sort of this reintroduction of this theme to me coming up of the brutality of nature. And I think as global warming progresses and natural disasters come, that's the macro version of it. Mother Nature is brutal. And I think sometimes that little inner critic voice, that's what's remaining of our brutality. I was speaking about this with Jessica last night about how when you watch reality TV, like the worst part of you comes out and you're judging everyone and you're talking trash with like whoever you're listening with. I was asking Jessica, I was like, what does this serve? Because every part of our psyche and humanity has a function. So, what does our need to judge and criticize serve? And it's that brutal survival of the fittest. It's like we judge and pick everyone apart because it is that very ingrained nature. So, basically, this is a long winded way to say when you notice that scarcity consciousness coming up, it's tied to survival of the fittest, it's tied to old, outdated programs. And I know we're coming into this area of so much Pisces energy, and I think it will be Pisces season when this comes out. The North Node is in Pisces, the Sun will be in Pisces, Venus will be retrograding back into Pisces, Saturn's in Pisces. There's so much Piscean energy, and Pisces is soul growth, evolution, forgiveness, release. And so that's where this idea of not holding on to things that are sort of a fit but not quite right, even after you've tried to make them work, comes in, because Pisces needs to like wash things away so that in the rebirth of Aries, when the spring equinox comes, we have space for all of the new life to fill. And so it's a very watery time, it's a very emotional time, but it's also very much like a master class moment. Like we are in our master class era where all of the toolbox from 2020 to 2024 is being put in this master class way for 2025, 2026. And Pisces season is so karmic, meaning it's like karmic relationships, it's endings and beginnings, it's soul lessons, because Pisces has a piece of each other zodiac sign. So it's like a completion of a cycle that's playing out all of the other lessons that have already been learned so that a new cycle can begin. And I just feel that energy so in such an interesting way, and it just seems like a moment where if you're not on the right path or you're trying to hold on to things from a scarcity consciousness place, there will be realignment, and it might not be what we want, but it might be what we need in a lot of ways, and it's prepping us for eclipse season.
Wow. And I'm a Pisces moon, so I'm sure I'm going to be feeling all of that. I think I'm already starting to feel it.
Yeah. You've had Saturn in Pisces, which is the tests, the lessons, the inner world, the security, the home, all of that.
I deeply relate to Pisces energy. It's a beautiful energy, and I love the water and all that, and very healing. Something you said too really spoke to me just about when we hang on to that scarcity consciousness. It's like we don't allow then for the space for something new and more aligned to fill it. I think that's so important to remember when we're clinging on to something that doesn't work, but we feel like we want it to work, which is so easy to do. And I really struggle with that. It's like, I want this thing to be the thing. And I think something I'm realizing is that the thing I want needs the space to be able to come in. And if I cling to this other thing that's like a shadow version of it or an almost version of it or an unaligned version of it, I'm literally not allowing space for the thing I'm dreaming of to come in. And so that's been a big, big lesson for me in all of this is just to like, step into that unknown and create that space and not have the answer necessarily of what will fill it. And that is a gift, not having the answer. It's not a bad thing.
Yeah, exactly. And speaking about all the Pisces energy, we're shifting from thinking, debating, playing judge and jury over our heart. Like those things are not going to work with the North Node in Pisces. They would work if the North Node was in Virgo and we needed more sort of boundaries and structures and ideas and plans and strategies. But with the North Node in Pisces, we're actually learning faith over fear is like a big collective lesson. And sounds simple, but it's not. And there's this shift from the thinking, debating, strategizing into feeling, dreaming, and intuiting. Those are going to be the main toolboxes for this next year and a half with the North Node in Pisces. And so, where we overthink, where we second guess, where we worry and have a lot of anxious attachment, that's the South Node in Virgo that we're breaking. And the North Node in Pisces is asking us to get more in alignment with, again, dreaming, intuiting, and feeling, even if that's in the micro moments of being like, does this actually feel good to me? Or am I just telling myself that it should? And in every micro moment, being so honest with ourselves about that. And that will start to reveal the answers to us of what needs to go, what can stay, what needs to be interacted with differently.
Yes, I love that. And it's such a powerful practice to really get quiet and tune into our deep intuition, our deep knowing of is this in alignment? Does this feel good? And it's a practice I've just been working on so, so much of not listening to that loud fear, anxious fear voice, but getting quiet and still with my intuitive knowing. And then when we have that relationship with our intuitive knowing and it's so strong, it's such a help, it's such a guide, and it can really be a comfort in difficult situations because you've trusted it before and you know that you can rely on it. And so when these difficult things come up, it's like it's there for me to help guide me. And it takes that practice. I'm definitely in that practice of strengthening it, but I'm feeling it stronger and stronger as I do it. It's really exciting.
Yeah, that is exciting. And it's such a valuable lesson. Like, once you get that lesson, you can't force yourself to try to force things anymore because you just see it. It's like the more you practice these things and see these things, you can never go backwards, which I think is really comforting.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like a tool that you strengthen and then you have for life.
I love that. So let's get into some of the listener questions and stories. I'm so excited.
Yes, you guys have sent in amazing questions. We have so many beautiful ones. We just love receiving all of your messages and stories. So keep sending them in contact at magichourpod.com.
I just want to shout out if you are like, I want to send in a listener question, but I don't know what to say. Imagine a question that you would DM to me, and that's a perfect listener question because sometimes people comment on things or DM me, and I'm like, I don't have time to type out a whole long response to this. And this question would help so many people. So just email it to the pod, and we absolutely love your questions. And you can ask questions about literally anything.
Yeah, exactly. The more varied, the better, because that gives us a lot of juicy things to dive into. And it's always so interesting to hear what Taylor has to say about it all. So keep them coming. Okay. This message is from Teresa. My question is about discomfort after calling in angels and guides. I recently had a reading with you, Taylor, which was incredible. You described my angels as persistent, which I can confirm. Recently, sometimes it's too overwhelming when I try to meditate and invite them in, and I experience anxiety and worry. I feel their presence very strongly in my body, which can trigger fear. Sometimes I start to worry about my family, their wellness, etc., and insert my own, I think, negative messages. I know you say that angels are all light, and most of the time I do feel that. I'm wondering if there are certain times it may be more challenging to engage in this spiritual practice, for example, after a loss or during a rough time. Any recommendations for moving through fear around connecting with angels and spirits, and how to tell the difference between our own anxieties versus actual messages we might be receiving? Thanks so much for reading, Teresa.
Thank you so much for this, Teresa. And thank you for your kind words about our session together. That's so sweet. Yes. So I would say this question is one of the most common questions that comes in around connecting with spirit, connecting with your angels. And so, as Claire was reading it, the feeling that I got from this specific case, and I'm sure it's very common as well, is that there's two forces at play. You say that you feel their presence very strongly in your body, and that probably feels warm, calming, emotional, beautiful, supportive. But then you say, but then I start to get overwhelmed. I get anxious and I start to feel all of these like warning things like what's going to happen to my family and what's going to happen here and what's going to happen there. So to me, this feels like two different systems at play. One is your clairsentience coming online. That's like, okay, I can feel the support. I can feel the regulation. I can feel the love. So that's the actual psychic sense. And then the second is the inner villain being like, oh, no, 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 we don't. We don't want you to break into new energetic territory of connection. It's not safe for our nervous system to be this regulated in angelic love, or else what if we don't survive? What if we get too comfortable? What if our family is going to XYZ? What are people going to think of us? And all of the fear starts coming up to try to keep you safe. So I always speak about how fear is a necessary part of intuitive reclamation. There's not one person, including myself, who goes on an intuitive journey and does not have to grapple with fear in one form or another, whether it's fear of fitting in, fear of looking crazy, fear of speaking your truth, fear of being wrong, fear of getting it wrong with your intuitive messages, fear of actually connecting to beings that you can't physically see. There's always an element of fear. So I would use this as an opportunity for you to get deeper. And instead of mistaking the fear as truth, which is the most common pitfall when it comes to fear, taking the fear as a messenger showing you deeper places to heal. And I think that that is where your angels and guides were taking you anyway. And I think also there's just a basic biological fear response where Claire and I were talking about in the intro how like brutal nature can be. Like we have a prey drive that kicks in and we're like, there's something all powerful around me that I can't see. I feel a little out of control and that makes me feel scared. So there's so many different layers of fear that coincide and coagulate in this experience. And so for me, if I was you and I got really overwhelmed, I would see like, where am I trying to be perfect in this experience of meditating? Where am I trying to get specific messages or guidance about specific things? For me, this feeling that I'm getting about this question feels a little tied to perfectionism and control because it's like all of a sudden I want to help my family. And if I'm connecting with angels, I feel like I have to be all knowing and know things that are going to happen and know things that are going to happen in my life. And I would just take all the pressure off. And I'm speaking to Teresa, but really in these questions, I'm speaking to everybody because we are all one and we all literally go through the same exact things. So I'm not harping on you, Teresa. I'm talking to everybody. But that's really what comes up for me is like seeing how you can be more light with the practice, more curious, and saying, okay, if the fear is not truth, and I know that my angels are all love, so this fear is actually showing me deeper layers of healing, which this intuitive work brings up the witch wound, which it's an ancestral wound. It's a wound of the collective unconscious of women. It's this feeling of like I could be persecuted for what I know, for my beliefs, for being different or other or hard to control or anything outside the norm. And people are going to come get me with pitchforks. So there's this very unsafe feeling with that. There can be an unsafe feeling within family and community and not wanting to be ostracized or coming off crazy, like what I was saying before. There's so many layers of fear coming up. And so I would sit with it. I would journal with it. I would ask yourself, like, what's the worst possible case scenario that could happen with angelic connection? Like, you're wrong about a message, or you misinterpret something, or there's no historical accounts of anybody being hurt by an angel or even a person in the spirit world. I think spiritual psychosis is a real thing. People think they're possessed and things like that. But again, like I've said this before on the podcast, people who have done atrocious things and killed entire groups of people, those people don't come back in the spirit world and try to hurt them and push them and scratch them and do all of these things. There's no evidence of that in this world. So it's like spirit truly is all love. We in the human realm are not all love. We have to very much grapple with fear and pain and wounding and trauma, and the spirit world is the protection. And so I think that there's also an element of maybe looking at, and this is actually bringing me to a deeper conversation and something I want to teach a workshop on, which is deconstructing the fear in the spiritual world. Because when we're born, we're inundated with scary movies. It's like if nobody ever made a scary movie about demonic possession and that wasn't in our collective consciousness, no person on earth would be like, I'm possessed by a demon. Like, it just wouldn't even occur to us to talk about it or think about it. Like, we have to deconstruct how deeply programmed we've been about the spirit world. And it is really interesting. Even as a psychic medium, if I see a scary movie or I go to a haunted house, it makes me really sad because it's making people so afraid of something that is so love filled. And so, in episode, I believe 203 of this season, we go into a deep dive about angels. And in my Be Your Own Angelic Intuitive workshop, I also go into a deep dive about conquering fear and energetic practices to feel protected and safe as you work through the space. So, there's so much to go into. But in terms of what you said about are there times where it's more challenging? Absolutely, because we are just humans. And when we are in a lower vibrational state, it's really hard to believe in the unconditional grounding love of angels. And on top of that, angels as a specific guiding light are less about predictions. And when we're in those lower vibrational places and our inner villain voice is like, is my mom going to die in a car crash? Or like something scary comes up that we want to get intuitive guidance on. That's not how angels really work. They're more like present, high vibe guidance that's like, all will be well. Things like that are like their style. So they will sometimes give specifics, but in my experience, a little less than other types of spirit guides. So it doesn't mean that our angels aren't always with us. And your story actually perfectly exemplifies what I always talk about, which is we can still connect in moments that we feel really intense and overwhelmed and anxious, and there's a lot going on. And it's exactly like you said, it's very hard to trust and get downloads and meditate from that place, but you could feel the support of them with you. So if you listen to the angel episode, Teresa's story is a perfect example of what I was talking about on that, where she's like, I feel the support, I feel the persistence, but I'm having a hard time grounding into any messages without knowing what's me, what's them. And that's the result of being in a high intensity time trying to connect with angels. And as you continue, that's where you can pull a card, that's where you can journal and just get a little lighter and more detached. And don't go into a session with such high expectations of the kind of intuitive guidance that will come through, and instead be playfully curious, open to support, and just in a more exploratory place because they're showing you the blocks that are the next homework assignment, that are the next chapter for your intuitive connection. So sometimes we go in and we're like, my expectation for this connection is a clear download about if my mom's going to be okay, but that's not actually the order of events that can work. The order of events next is for you to heal a deeper layer of fear, for you to listen to an inner child message, for you to feel safer so that you can get to the truth. Because here's the thing about connecting with angels, if we're in our shadow and connecting with any spiritual being, if we're in our shadow, we won't be able to see the truth or the full picture because life isn't all love and light. And sometimes the truth is something that would scare an earlier version of self because we don't know what's coming down the road. We want things to work out. We want to hold on to things. It really ties back into that scarcity message in the beginning. When we're in that place of fear and scarcity and attachment to outcomes, it's almost impossible to be a clear, intuitive channel for ourselves and our loved ones because we care so much. That's why it's easier for me to read for people that I don't know because I can just be objective in the information. So, them showing you a next level of healing, of what you're worrying about, of a detachment from outcomes is actually the processing that needs to be done so that you can be a clearer intuitive channel and can get the types of messages and downloads that you want to get. So it's all working in a way, even if it feels like it's not as linear as you would expect. And again, at this point, I'm not even just talking about Teresa, I'm talking to everybody here, and take what applies to you because some of it might apply, some of it might not. But when it comes to differentiating between fear and intuition, fear is loud. It's based in what will happen or what has happened in the past. It's also the best liar in the world, which I always say. It's rooted in like victim consciousness sometimes, this narrative of powerlessness and everything is happening to me instead of for me. Fear tries to keep you small. Fear feels extremely nervous system dysregulating. And I also find that it likes to create a sense of urgency where it's like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Like everything has to be fixed now. I need all the answers right now. Whereas intuition is nervous system regulating, it's based in the present moment, it's based on how to move forward here and now. It's calm, it's simple, it's never based in fear. It's always love. It's not ever going to be mean or condescending or fearful. So when it's an intuitive message, I always say the truth is simple. And true intuitive messages do sound like you've got this or leave this person. Like there will be just like clear forward momentum that tells you how to move forward. And if you choose not to make that decision or listen to that guidance, it doesn't mean you're like screwed over for the rest of time. They'll course correct you down the line. Like it's all good. I also feel like with that nervous system regulating aspect of intuition, it doesn't have that same urgency. It's like, okay, I can sit for a minute, I can breathe, I can process before I decide what I want to do. Again, tune into your physical body, ask it what a yes feels like. That's what intuition feels like. Ask it what a no feels like. That's what fear feels like. So you can also say, angels, how does intuition land in my body? And just stay open and see what you feel, see what you see what you sense, see what you know, see what you hear. And then conversely ask, what does fear make me feel like in my body? And start to learn that your body is the biggest divining tool that you have, and start to learn how different things lock you up or open you up, because that's going to unlock this North Node in Pisces time where even just being around somebody that makes you feel less than or small or dims your light or drains you, that is energetic guidance right there. Your body is telling you, your angels and guides are telling you. And then the head, this relates so much to what we were saying in the beginning. Your head will be like, but I should. And we've been friends for this long and I have to keep doing it. And it's like, no, no, no. We're moving away from old paradigms of self sacrifice, which self sacrifice is the purposeful ignorance of intuition. And we're moving into my brain might not understand it, but my heart demands it. And that is the puzzle piece of moving forward with your path of highest good, reconnecting with your soul. And so that's the big lesson right now. So going back to this question, in that moment, your heart understood that your angels were with you. Your mind was bringing up every possible fear and anxiety. That fear and anxiety is not the truth, but it's revealing a deeper layer of release and also probably bringing up current things that you're grappling with and showing you what needs to be looked at right now. Because sometimes we also, and again, this isn't just for Teresa, it's for everybody. Sometimes we also want to get right to the spiritual takeaway and the lesson and what's next and be like, I'm integrated. I've learned my lesson. I'm ready to move forward. But it's like, no, you haven't gone through all of the feeling or the shame or the things that need to be processed and looked at, the uncomfortable stuff. We want to skip right to the spiritual takeaway. And that's doing ourselves a disservice because we're here to have this human experience.
Yeah, so well put. We grow so much in those uncomfortable moments. That is really how we shape and expand ourselves. And I think we're just so resistant to those things. It's like, oh, I'm feeling this anxiety or this fear or this worry. I don't want to feel those things. And I think in that way, we can push them aside or push them away. And I think it's shifting to saying, okay, fear, you want me to hear you. What do you have to say to me? It doesn't mean it's true, but you clearly wanna tell me something. So what do you wanna tell me? And then how can I look at that in a different way as information that it's something I need to process and work through or face or grapple with. I'm not as developed as Taylor in her practice, right? I mean, I don't know anyone who is, or many of our guests have been, but, I'm much more like a lot of you where I'm still learning and understanding. And oftentimes I feel like I'm feeling around in the dark and like, maybe, I don't know. And that can be a really humbling and confronting experience because I think when we feel like we might be wrong, we can feel really embarrassed and ashamed. And so I have really had that experience with my spiritual practice of like, but what if I'm wrong? What if I think this message is for me and it's not? Or what if I've interpreted it wrong? Or what if I'm connecting to my angels and I'm not, and like the shame and worry around doing it wrong or not having it perfect, like you said. And I think in those moments, it can be really important to maybe let go of needing an answer, like Taylor was saying, of needing to get that message, and instead simply trying to like connect and ground to the love that is the vibration of our angels. Taylor will sometimes say to me, like, feel your angels' wings wrapping around you in their loving embrace. Feel their light all around you and just sit in and connect to that connection without an expectation of a message coming through or an answer coming through. Simply connect to feel their love and to feel supported. And in that experience, you may end up having an insight because you're connecting to that deep love and support. And so I feel like when I'm in that kind of like anxiety, fear, unknowing, disconnection from my practice, I try to like just ground into that experience. Maybe not even pull a card, just sit in their love and their light and then come back to it another time and come back to it another time. And I feel like eventually the answer that you're searching for becomes clear anyway because you're opening yourself to it.
Yes, that was so good and such an important part of the puzzle because it's true. And like, I'm in a different place of my development, like you said, but those are such valuable insights. And I've also been there in my practice too. And so, yeah, there's so much that you just said that's so important. First of all, that fear never goes away. It's how much you listen to it that changes. That voice never goes away, even as a professional reader. And when I start to get into new situations that scare me and bring up that inner villain voice, and I start to feel uncertain, like my time at Arthur Findlay College, or like I've said, reading for different high profile clients, that voice starts to come back. And it's like, what if nothing comes through? What if blah, blah, blah? Like at this point, I know I'm connecting with angels. That part doesn't scare me, but that voice never goes away. It's similar to our trust issues in relationships with people who are here. There's always this fear. What if they hurt me? What if they leave me? It's like, it's no different. So it's just lived experience and letting that person show you and earn your trust. It's the same exact thing with our angels and guides. And then on top of that, I think what Claire said about not being attached to an outcome within that setting is so important. And I invite you guys to, instead of trying to say, angels, will I meet my soulmate this year? As you're connecting and then putting all this pressure on it and having it be really specific, like sitting with your angels and just saying, angels, my intention for our space together today is for you to give me whatever I need for my highest good. Because what you don't realize is that sometimes your angels and guides are actually giving you messages that you need to hear right now. Sometimes they're sending you healing. Sometimes they're revealing some shadows that need to be looked at. Sometimes they're priming your consciousness to catch other signs and synchronicities throughout the day. It's like there's actually a lot of ways that our angels and guides are working with us outside of just actively sending messages that our consciousness can understand. They might be doing so many more things behind the scenes, and us trying to only look for successful connection as one way that can be rooted in ego or comparison to others can have us missing out on the whole other spectrum of spiritual gifts that our angels and guides are giving to us. It might just be a loved one that wants to hug you for 30 minutes while you meditate. It could be anything. Just stay open to that. The other thing that was coming up as Claire was talking was actually confronting our worst case scenarios. For me, losing my mom was a worst case scenario situation. That was my inner child's literal worst nightmare. And it became a path that made me so much stronger on the other side. But you don't have to actually go through the worst case scenarios to no longer let those worst case scenarios pull your puppet strings. And we all have different worst case scenarios that are perfectly tailored to our shadows, our fears, our insecurities, our past wounding. We all have like somebody's worst case scenario could be somebody else's like joy. It just depends on who we are and what we want from this life. I was speaking with somebody who recently went through a really painful breakup, and she was like, "What if I'm going to be 50 and alone?" And was like, let's talk about that if you're ready and want to. 50 and alone from a place of fear and scarcity and not being able to be your own worthiness generator and also build a life that you love seems very sad and daunting and threatening from that perspective. But if you build a life that you love and are living your purpose, it's so much better to be 50 and quote unquote alone. She was speaking about romantically than with a partner that's like going to boss you around and trap you and abuse you. So it's like, let's actually give that image of 50 and alone and not give it power over you. Like it's pulling the puppet strings, trying to get you to get into a romance to settle basically, or to feel really desperate moving through the dating world. So like, sometimes our worst case scenarios, like, what if I lose this job? What if I go no contact with this person? What if this happens? It's like sitting with that and taking our power back from worst case scenarios. Because the thing about humans is that we're super resilient. We have more power than we even recognize. And there's always silver linings in worst case scenarios. And so I think not letting worst case scenarios pull the puppet strings of our consciousness. Like sometimes in the spiritual world, I think there's a lot of fear based programming that it's like, don't think any single negative thought or you'll attract it to you, which is just so not right. It's don't believe those negative thoughts as truth or you'll attract it to. But you can contemplate, pontificate, analyze. That's just self discovery. And if we run from that, we're running from like really knowing ourselves and loving ourselves and working on ourselves in a deeper level. So I think that doing this work can feel really like sticky and scary for some people because they don't want to call it in. But not doing this work is almost worse because you're letting it run rampant, pulling subconscious puppet strings.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I really recognized like this past year, I was like so caught up in like worst case scenarios and that same type of thinking of one day I'm going to be old. And what if I'm all alone? And it's like, I had this realization too, where I was like, well, today you're not. You're not alone and you're not old. And when you're older and you deem yourself to be old, I bet you'll look back on this time and be like, why were you so caught up in this future? You had all the things you were so scared of losing. And instead of just being in the joy of that, you were in the worry about later, what if? And it's so normal to be in that. And like you said, we have to like explore those things and not deny them. But I think recognizing, yes, there's a million scenarios that could be bad, that could happen, and all of that, but what is real in this moment right now? And can we anchor into that and decide that whatever worst case scenario I'm so worried about is only in my mind and isn't what's happening here in this moment right now? And that's the only moment that exists. And so, can we embrace and anchor into that? And then I'm sure we will face whatever challenges when we face them. And chances are they probably won't be as bad as we think, or they will be a way that our consciousness, our life, our energy will grow and evolve. Even with your worst case scenario that happened, it's not like it was for the best that you lost your mother, but you have alchemized that painful experience into such beautiful growth and expansion of self. And so it's so comforting to me knowing that even when the challenges come my way, that they will also be an opportunity for me to know myself deeper and expand myself even further, and that I can face them in that mindset. And I only need to face them when they arrive, not in this moment. I can let go of all of that stuff in this moment and embrace all the beauty that is here and now.
Yes, I love that so much. And the whole worst case scenario thing, the image I get is literally our inner villain in a little beret painting a big picture. If you use the inner villain voice as a tool, which is basically taking our like meanest thoughts about ourselves and saying it in some sort of over the top villain voice, like Claire's is like a douchey skater bro or surfer bro voice. Mine is Dr. Evil from Austin Powers. Like, whatever voice resonates with you, you'll realize how crazy it sounds. And I feel like there could be kind of an evolution of this exercise where you get like watercolors or paints or colored pencils and draw a picture of your worst case scenario as your inner villain. Make it a joke. Like, just see how ridiculous it is. Like, your inner villain just being like, and this could happen, and that, and this. That's literally like their work of art is like painting that worst case scenario photo for us. And maybe if we engage with that through a creative process and try to make it as disastrous, almost from a funny place, like it might turn into funny. I know that it's sad and maybe I just have a dark sense of humor. Worst case scenario stuff, I do have a comedy background and I do kind of laugh when I'm uncomfortable or like in pain. It's like my go to thing. But for anybody that resonates with that, it's kind of like a different vein of what I call a shadow board, which is what I talk about in my Love Life workshop, which is basically instead of a vision board, it's making a shadow board. Everything we're scared of, insecure about, ashamed of, putting it onto a board like we would a vision board. And we don't have to hang it up. We can store it away somewhere. But as you go on the healing journey, that shadow board will have less and less power over you every time you look at it. And you'll have more empathy and sympathy for the version of yourself that was in the puppet strings of those shadows. And so I think it's a similar thing if you decide to paint with your inner villain and see how ridiculous the worst case scenarios can be, because life is chaotic and the only thing we can control is our response to it. And our response to it always exists in the present moment, just like Claire said. So I think that if somebody wants to try that, I might do like a watercolor and then you can burn it after. You don't have to keep it. You can keep it hidden away and maybe look at it. Just thinking of your inner villain doing like a finger painting of trying to make you like so scared and see like the worst possible case scenario to try to keep you so small. And when you can bring some lightness to it, it breaks its spell of control over you because you realize just how ridiculous it sounds.
Yeah, that's why it's so important sometimes to say these things out loud because it's like once you say it out loud, you hear how crazy it sounds or how exaggerated or dramatic or ridiculous it sounds. And I think that's the beauty of shadow work. As soon as you shine your awareness light on it, it stops being this like big boogeyman. It stops being this like terrifying thing. And you realize, oh, once I face it, it's not the monster that I'm allowing it to be in the dark recesses of my shadows. And I think that's why it's such a great tool to do the inner villain voice like that because it shows you how ridiculous this is and how there's no need to believe it and hang on to it. It's like, why would I believe the voice of a douchey frat bro? What he doesn't know anything. So I think when you frame it like that, you can be more lighthearted and you can really face your fears in that way and see that they're not these like huge monsters. They're just things that are trying to protect you and you can thank them and say, "You know what? I don't need that protection right now. I've got this."
Yeah. And I think just as an asterisk, like this doesn't have to be an exercise that involves an actual tragedy that you went through because that's like already happened. This is actually just pinpointing the made up, wild, out there, worst case scenario, fearful stories that your inner villain is telling you could happen.
Exactly.
Awesome. Let's move on to another one.
Okay, great. I know we really dove into that one.
It's such a big topic. There's just so much to say.
I feel like this one also will have a lot to say. So, this is a question from Charlene. In the episode with Tori Feldman, she spoke about the power of ancestral healing. I understand that this is for our present incarnation and can heal past trauma for many, many generations and our own current carried trauma. I also understand that we incarnate with mostly the same soul group playing out different roles for our soul's evolution. Do we carry trauma from different incarnations as our soul groups travel with us? In other words, our mother in a previous concurrent life might be our best friend in this lifetime, so we aren't always blood relatives with members of our soul group. Would I carry trauma from my mother from a different incarnation? I understand carrying trauma from my current bloodline on each parent's side, but the past concurrent life stuff makes my brain trip. LOL. It's like back to the future. Also, Tori talked about settling beefs on the other side. My understanding is that it's pure love on the other side. So, how can there still be Jews having conflicts with Germans, for example? Since it's also my understanding that we're all playing a role on Earth, and that role becomes clear on the other side. Related to that, how are there dark energies on the other side if we are all pure love? Sorry, lots of questions. As every podcast I listen to and every book I read opens up a whole realm of new queries for me. Thanks for being so beautiful and pure, Charlene.
I love these questions. Thank you, Charlene. And there's so much to say. You're correct on that, Claire. Yeah, but I love it. And this is perfect. I always have to preface with that I don't believe any one person has all of the answers or has the capacity to have all of the answers in human form. And I'm very wary of people who claim that they have all of the answers. So this will be a sort of philosophical chat based off of my experience in the space, but in no way am I saying I claim to know every single thing about the universe. So that being said, I think next week when this comes out, we'll have an episode with Rebecca Campbell coming out where we actually discuss a little bit of this, which is ancestral memories versus soul memories. And so I very much do believe that we can have soul groups, like you said, that are not ancestral in this lineage, but who we had other soul ties and connections with in other lifetimes. And I've seen that in my readings. For example, I was connecting with this lady really early on in the beginning of my practice, and sometimes past lifetimes drop in like little movies that I'm seeing. And she was asking me about her husband. And I said, I'm just seeing a past lifetime where your husband was a merchant and he was on this ship and he was always away at long voyages and you had to hold everything together at home and you'd always wait for him on the docks and you were always nervous that he was going to be in a storm and he was always away from you and that was a big heartbreak for you in that lifetime because he was just never with you and that was really tough. And she said, it's crazy that you're saying that because in this lifetime, he is on a ship in the military on these like long expeditions and he's never home. And I have to run everything and take care of everything. And I'm always longing for him and he's always gone. And it's like the biggest heartbreak of my life is not getting to spend my time with the love of my life. And so her angels, and not just her angels, all angels bring up these connections for a reason. Like past lifetimes that pop into my awareness are never arbitrary. They're coming up because they have to do with these things that you're talking about, like soul memories and cycle breaking and healing. And so for her, her angels were basically saying in that past lifetime, you had no choices. And in this lifetime, you do. And that it's basically time for you and your husband to talk things out and restructure things because this path works for him and it hasn't worked for you historically and it's still not working for you. And there's deeper healing and reclamation of power to do in this lifetime. And the energy of him was very much unconscious about how she felt because she was always people pleasing and keeping a happy face and not really confiding in him anyway. And this was an opportunity for both of their souls to have deeper closeness and connection and intimacy in this life after feeling so separate and distant in past lives and this life. So, that to me, along with a lot of other past lifetime things that have dropped in, shows me that we do have karma with different people, meaning past life experiences that we came here to make a new, healed, wise choice in this lifetime. That is different than ancestral healing. So, ancestral healing is like the lineage and the blood and the DNA of the body that our soul has come into actually carries on an epigenetic level the pain of all of the ancestors that came before. Now, sometimes there might be crossovers. Sometimes there might be somebody who was your great grandma in this lineage that you're like cycle breaking for, and also was your husband in a completely different time period. It's like there can be crossovers in that way, but not always. And so, with that kind of healing, that is more like feeling the feelings, processing things. It's like the human embodiment level. Not that the soul themes aren't, but the soul themes are almost like bigger picture to me. They're like themes that you came here to make new choices with, relationships that you came here to do a song and dance with in a different way. They're bigger picture soul lessons of who you came here to be, what you came here to learn. Sometimes we have soul lessons with people where it's just like, I'll help you wake up on your path. You help me wake up on my path, but we can't actually be together in any real way. And that's by design. So, like, shake on it and I'll see you there. There's like different ways that this can come into play. And so I think the soul lessons are tied to the past life stuff and like the embodiment, human processing, feeling, regulating is the ancestral. But oftentimes the soul will pick a lineage in a similar vein of healing with the soul and incarnate with the ancestors. So we'll incarnate into the exact family circumstances that are thematically relevant, which is where it can start to also get foggy because it's like, this is like my ancestral themes is men walking out, but then I'm also experiencing that. And I also have past life memories tied to that. And it's like, yeah, because your soul knows that this is the healing that this lineage on earth needs. So it picked this one to explore these soul themes. So it's really interesting that this is coming up because when it comes to a podcast, not to like break the fourth wall too much, but we don't always record things in order. And so this podcast coming out next week, we'll be talking about this. And I give some other insights in that episode that I don't want to spoil right now. I want you to hear it when I say it there, because there was a really cool download about the difference between soul memory versus ancestral that came through as I was interviewing. So stay tuned for that. So that's basically the best way I can explain the difference between both. Claire, before I move on, is there anything that's not clear about that?
I mean, it's a wild and wondrous topic that is like hard to fully grasp. I think it makes sense for sure the way you explained it. And also, my brain is like flitting off into a million ideas and possibilities around all that. But yeah, I think it makes sense. It's like it's different, but also can connect and bleed into each other as well.
Yes, exactly. And it's all also happening all at once. That's why nobody can ever really fully understand because our bodies anchor us into the current timeline of consciousness that we're experiencing. But when you're not in a body, you're not anchored by that. So it's just very interesting. And that's why it's very interesting working with your angels because they're with you in every single timeline and dimension of your soul. And so they see everything. And that's why they're so simple and easy on us because they're like, girl, you have no idea how much you're actually doing right now. Like, just be chill. So it's a really big topic. I hope that makes sense in the way that I explained it. And it is very interesting. And I do believe that there are certain souls that we do this dance with a lot and have different agreements with, as well as locations that are very sacred to our soul, also locations that are sacred to our ancestors. So it's slightly different, but because our soul chooses ancestral lines that will progress the lessons that our soul wants to learn and the healing that we want to do, there is just a very beautiful synergy that can happen between the two. And it's all in the vein of healing. But just this idea of beef on the other side is something that doesn't fully resonate with me because when we are out of our physical body, we're back to oneness. That being said, it doesn't mean that there isn't healing on the other side because that I believe in. And I hear that when I connect. I'm like, oh, this abusive person is now in spirit with the person that they abused. And there can be a lot of forgiveness and understanding and connection on the other side. And speaking about soul groups, they might decide to do it again in a different way. So there is this consideration of wounded consciousness on the other side, but I don't think spirits actively beef with each other. I think that they can understand from a higher perspective and then choose to do the dance again in another way or have different experiences. So I would understand why you would be a little confused about that because I actively say the other way on the pod all the time. So, yeah, I do believe in ancestral healing. And I also don't believe in dark spirits or dark energies. I do believe in spiritual psychosis, which is basically where you get indoctrinated into superstitious religious beliefs to such an extent that your brain co-creates with them and puts you into a state of psychosis where you so believe that what you're saying is true. And I think that the spiritual world and the religious world can be very dangerous for that. It's really interesting how much these questions are connecting back to the intro because even just the soul level lessons is very connected to all of the karmic Piscean themes I was talking about. And then this idea of darkness on the other side also really connects to like Teresa's question too. So, yeah, I believe that the spirit world is all love. I believe that we're not all love and we have duality here. And if we were all love, there'd be no incentive for our souls to learn lessons here because there wouldn't be duality to experience. And I think that's what's so interesting from a soul perspective. So these are like big questions with big answers, but these are to the best of my understanding. And I know different people believe in negative spirits, but I truly believe that if we don't really believe in them, there is no power there.
Yeah, I feel that to be really true as well. As someone who like grew up feeling very fearful about that kind of stuff. And, you have this great energetic law of I'm the most powerful being in this room, which I often say to myself. And then I had this great realization where I was like, well, do you believe that? Then you don't need to keep saying this. If you truly believe that that's true, then you don't need to keep shouting it into the dark to scare off the spirits. Like, just believe it and then move on. And so I think that's been this like deeper layer for me. And something else I wanted to touch on when you were talking about just that it's all love on the other side. This was just my personal experience with you, but early on in your mediumship, we did a reading and you connected with my grandfather. And it was just such a beautiful thing because his message was about how he recognized the pain that had been between him and my mother, and that he was in a different consciousness about it and like a different awareness about it. And his main message was sharing that he understood the pain that had been created and that he was sending love and healing towards my mother and towards me and expressing a different frequency from where he was in the spirit realm because his consciousness had that fuller understanding of their dynamic and of everything basically. And so I think that is like another layer. At least that was just my one personal experience with it, but it felt like it really highlighted this thing that is this like funny duality about life. It's like I think when we're living, we want to be back in the oneness and understand the oneness and why we're here. And it's like I think the point was that we chose to be in a space where we do not understand so that we can bump up against difficult challenges and grow our soul. It's like if we don't have challenges like we were saying, we don't expand to the same level that we could. And so it defeats the purpose. I think if we fully could grasp what's happening here, it would defeat the purpose of being here and the beautiful expanding experience that it is to be a human being. So I think accepting that I'm not supposed to fully know, I'm supposed to be in this complicated duality and knowing that once I pass into the other realm again, then I will be in that oneness and that full understanding with all the added benefit of this soul journey.
Yes. Again, so many good points that I need to respond to. One of them is maybe that's why being in the unknown is so profusely uncomfortable for us because our regular imprint is to be in oneness. So, just the idea of being in the unknown
Yes.
goes against our soul's design and makeup. And so, it feels so profoundly uncomfortable because we're used to being all oneness. And so, being plopped out of being in oneness is like, probably one of the most painful experiences for a soul, like to voluntarily go somewhere where you forget who you are for a while. And the whole point of the journey is to remember. So that's just so interesting to me. And I think that what you said about your grandpa is so true. And as a medium, that's the pattern always. That's why I don't agree with ancestors beefing on the other side because there is never somebody who comes through in a reading and is like, tell my son to F off and he's stupid. That is just not happening. It's always, I've reflected, I'm sorry for this. And their messages are always wanting to facilitate healing. That is their MO. It's always an apology, a reflection. I'm sorry that I gaslit you. Your experience was completely valid. And me, as the medium that doesn't know your ancestor, it makes it even more powerful because it's clear evidence that it's them. It's never somebody trying to like keep the drama alive on the other side. It's never somebody trying to manipulate you or hurt you on the other side. And in fact, if that happens, that's a reflection of the medium projecting their own trauma and consciousness and it's an underdeveloped medium making the spirit world look that way, because the spirit world, if you go to, like, imagine Tyler Henry, undoubtedly one of the most revered mediums of our time, being at a show and being like, your grandma says that she hates you and that she doesn't want you to take her house. That would just never happen. That's human consciousness. That's who we are when we're here in our pain and our trauma and our wounding. And so I think that's more proof and evidence that the experiences are always to the contrary of, like, how can I facilitate healing? How can I give a heads up? How can I show you I'm watching over you? And if anything, how can I be there for you more on the other side than I had the capacity to when I was here in a physical body?
Yeah. It's such a beautiful way to look at it. And I think when we get quiet and still with our intuitive knowing, we feel that truth really deeply. And we feel that the conflicts that we're going through now are a part of our limited consciousness. And so I think going back to Teresa's question, it's like a great practice in getting with that quiet, still voice of intuition inside and really feeling into like, when I really get still and quiet with myself, does it resonate with me that ancestors are beefing on the other side? Or does that not feel like it's in resonance with me? Does that just feel like something scary and worrisome and a trap? And same with like dark spirits. It's like, I think it's a great place to start with your intuition too. It's like when these questions come up, getting really still with yourself and really listening to that deep knowing and letting that be your guide.
Yeah. And I think that the things that come through in the spiritual world that seem dark or demonic can either be a projection of what we've been taught to think of the other side onto actually like our quote unquote demons. Like
Mm.
our anger, our grief, our powerlessness or perceived powerlessness. Like those are the real quote unquote demons, not anything on the other side. And sometimes humanity loves to like blame and look at literally anything but themselves. Like I've said this before, like sharks are so scary, like ghosts are so scary, whatever is so scary. But like, no, we are actually so scary. And the shadows can go so dark that we feel such shame around that. Like, shame is one of the biggest obstacles to shadow work. Like, we have to really feel comfortable processing shame to get anywhere, because none of us is perfect. All of us have that inner villain voice. All of us have those like darker thoughts and impulses that try to impose on us and say crazy shit. That's why I think the exercise is like finger painting as that version of ourselves is like so funny. So, yeah, I think that when it comes to this work, going to those places and realizing like actually all of the scariest stuff is right here inside of me. But that's such a hard thing to reconcile sometimes, that it's so much easier to be like, I'm possessed. It's like, no, girl, you're not possessed. Like, you just have some deeper shame and healing and release, as do all of us. I also really liked what you said, Claire, about the most powerful being in this room is me story and mantra. It's so funny because I literally forgot about that. That was such a pinnacle of my teachings for so long. But it's similar to my promise ring story I told in 201. And like you just said, do I even need this mantra anymore? Because it's actually so ingrained on a subconscious level. That's my truth now. And so I feel like Angels and Amethyst has evolved. My practice has evolved to a place where I literally forgot to tell people about that tool because I don't need it anymore. And I remember I used to, of course, be so plagued every single night by like feeling spirits that I couldn't see or understand. And that scares the F out of anybody who hasn't been educated in this space. So then I would say that same mantra, like I could barely sleep with the lights off without being like, the most powerful thing in the room is me. I'm the most powerful. But as I continued my angelic practice, as my gifts started to come more online, as I started to be more immersed into my spiritual ways, I remember the turning point for me. I would have the same nightmare like my entire life growing up, which was like I was always home. There were ghosts in the house. Nobody could see the ghosts but me. And it was my job to get rid of the ghosts. Like I had the same, which I can go into that dissection of that dream in detail because I realized what it was trying to tell me, but I'll save that for another time. So I remember the first time I had that dream since really integrating that mantra. And I remember in the dream being like, oh, the most powerful thing in here is me. And the ghost just left. And the dream was no longer a nightmare. It was a dream. And even on the deep psyche level of the dream world, I felt my angels around me. I felt so powerful. And I knew that I was the most powerful being in the room as deep truth. And from that time on, I knew I had truly healed it on like the deepest integrated level. So it's so cool how these crutches that we need along the way, which are totally fine. It's similar to how a little kid needs training wheels and they can take it off and then they learn to drive a car. It's like we have natural progressions in every single evolution. And having these training wheels that help us ramp up to being so integrated in our power in this spiritual work is so beautiful. And it's beautiful to reflect back on, hey, I don't need those training wheels anymore. If you pull out your shadow board, if you ever did that exercise, even from a year ago, or maybe even 2 years ago, you're like, wow, look how far I've come. I can cross this and this and this off my shadow board. And this still has a little power over me. I'd like to get curious about that. Maybe I'll work with that. Maybe I won't. But these things I can let go of. So it's nice to see the yardsticks in your spiritual growth and evolution. And I think this time, like the true measure of our spiritual consciousness is how we move through the world when we feel out of control and when things aren't going our way. And I think like this time period on a collective level is so chaotic and intense. That's why I keep calling it a master class. And we might realize yardsticks in our development of ways that we make a more healed or powerful choice.
Yes. And I think something so important to recognize in that is that it takes you get to that yardstick and you look back and you're like, wow, I've made this change. And the way the change comes about is by that repeated action. And in those moments that you take that action, they often feel small. Like in the moments that I would be in my apartment and think I felt some sort of presence and would assert I'm the most powerful being in this room, it didn't feel like this, whoa, life changing shift I'd made. It was like, this tiny, tiny thing I could do in this moment to feel grounded and safe. And even what I was saying to Teresa about, okay, I'm in a bunch of fear and anxiety trying to connect. And instead, I'm just going to try and feel the warm, loving energy of my angels and not look for an answer, just feel that frequency. And then, later on, maybe that won't feel super profound, or maybe you'll still feel frustrated. But later on, when you then get to that benchmark and look back, you realize that all those tiny moments that you anchored in, that you listened, that you connected, that maybe didn't feel like a huge leap, they all built upon each other to get you to this new level where you don't even need that tool anymore. And so don't discount these tiny steps, these tiny moments. They build, they create the fuller picture for you. And none of those moments are wasted.
That's so true. And it kind of is a similar message on the flip side to when we see scary media about spirit. When we see media about people in their power, it is these like big cinematic moments where the lights flicker and like they're filled with light and they float off the floor and they feel like so empowered. We've been primed to look for certain cues that mean that we're being successful in our spiritual practice as well. Even spiritual creators on TikTok or Instagram talking about their highlight reel of intuitive connection. Like we can take that in and be like, oh my gosh, mine doesn't look that way. But like what you said is so true. It's the summation of all of these micro moments that it's like a small little choice, a small little new thing, a way that the needle moves slightly forward. And that is so powerful in the long run, too.
Yeah, I think that's the most powerful thing. And I think that's like the funny duality of it. It's like in the moment, it doesn't feel like this hugely powerful thing that you did, but it is the repetition. It is the choice to turn to it over and over again. It's the choice to choose it. It's the choice to open to it that eventually gets you there. My dance teacher would always say, when you come into a dance class, you're not going to get this much better today. You are going to think of it, just chip away at it. Today, maybe you'll get a little bit better and a little bit better. And then in a year or two, you'll realize, oh my gosh, I'm doing double pirouettes. It's happened. But it didn't happen that first day that you're like, I want to nail this. So I think that's so true about everything in life. I just try and look at it and be like, you know what? I'm just going to chip away at it. And eventually I'll have a beautiful statue that I've whittled away or whatever.
Literally me trying to do the splits.
Yes, but that's so true. You must, like, slowly build to it. You have to.
I mean, I gave up a long time ago, who am I kidding? But
It's never too late to do the
it's
splits,
never
you
too late,
guys.
and I would like to have hip mobility. But I so agree, and, like, spiritual growth isn't glamorous. It just isn't. Like, it can have moments that feel glamorous, but we live in this society where social media and the spiritual industry turns up the volume on making everything aesthetic, and spiritual growth, like, it isn't glamorous. It is just the little ways we love ourselves and show up for ourselves and stay consistent. Life isn't glamorous a lot of the times. And when you're measuring yourself on someone else's highlight reel on social media, which is like the only thing that primes our consciousness of what to expect, we can feel like failures. We can feel less than. When in reality, you're exactly where you need to be, doing exactly what you need to do. Your angels and guides are perfectly tailored to you and your abilities and your ways of picking up information. And all you have to do is lean into authenticity, trust, and doing what feels good, micro moment to micro moment to micro moment. And if it's not glamorous, that's okay. If it is glamorous, that's okay too. But don't feel bad if it isn't glamorous, because there will be moments that are like, holy shit, this could be a movie. And there more commonly will be moments that are just you being dedicated and steady in your practice, in your cultivation of deeper trust, deeper connection, deeper nervous system regulation, and deeper shining light on the fear. So just keep it up, because no matter where you're at in your spiritual practice, you're exactly where you need to be. And whatever's coming up is perfect for you to examine here and now.
So beautifully said. Such a great reminder.
Thank you. I guess it's that time to transition to sitting with spirit.
Let's do it.
Welcome back to Sitting with Spirit. Beautiful, beautiful hummingbirds. Oh my gosh, I just noticed it's 4:44 as we're recording this, which is so funny because we were supposed to record at 3:45 and then Claire and I talked for a whole hour. But it was all meant to be because now we're recording at 4:44 and that just feels right. So, I wanted to start off this Sitting with Spirit, which, if you're new to the podcast, welcome. This is the part of the podcast where I sit with our angels and guides, loved ones in spirit, and give the messages for the collective. Take what resonates, leave the rest. And in that vein, always run every spiritual message through the barometer of your own heart space. Like Claire and I were just talking about the importance of that before we were recording, where it's like some messages in a reading might not fully land with you. Maybe they'll make more sense as time goes on, but sit with what your heart really feels like it needs to hear and leave the rest. Don't let spiritual messages be a sign of anxiety or like something that induces anxiety to wonder how it applies to you. If it doesn't immediately resonate, it's not for you. And that's totally fine, especially in a format that's meant for a lot of people. And don't try to make things fit. That's very important too. It's like sometimes in this spiritual work, we want to make things fit. We want things to be just this perfect way. And sometimes if they don't fit, that means it's not for you. And that's okay. Not every message is for you. And maybe your angels and guides have a bigger reason for that. Like they want you to lean on your own authority, your own heart, and your own trust. There's so many ways that that could have a perfect design for you. So, with everything, let's lean into trust. Even if a message is like, oh my God, my aunt needs to hear this, send it to them. It's like, how can we be a little more fluid with how we give and receive information and less attached to things that don't fully resonate? If they don't, then it's not for you here and now. And maybe when you listen to this again, or maybe this episode finds you at a different point in life, not even just this episode, but any spiritual message, it will make sense then. So don't worry, just run everything through your heart. Use every message as a exercise in spiritual discernment, which is so important. Because this leads me to the next point, that we are in this moment energetically with so much Piscean energy. And there is this like higher spiritual connection. There is this ability for spiritual growths and downloads and intuition. And something that's so important to remember is that spirituality exists from the inside out, not the other way around. And so it truly takes the deep spiritual work of loving ourselves, knowing ourselves, sitting in radical authenticity and radical truth that is very much rooted in the earth element to have healthy embodiment of the spiritual, esoteric, ineffable realms of the water element. And I just feel like something that's been coming up so much is that it's really important to be here, be grounded, remember that we came to be on earth for a reason. And in this time with all this Piscean energy, where it feels like we want to ascend and escape, to remember that we came here for a reason and that we need to be of service, and that spiritual messages are like the most humble, beautiful gift. But we can't forget that we came here for human experiences and everything is about duality. So if all of this Pisces energy is like pulling you to want to escape or numb or avoid or be in a fantasy, how can you come back to your body, to the truth, to sitting with your emotions? That just feels really important. Like the Pisces Virgo polarity is coming up a lot right now with the North Node in Pisces. We can't have healthy embodiment of Piscean energy if we don't have healthy embodiment of Virgo energy first, which is mind and body healing, structures, boundaries, clear strategies for how we want to move forward. Then we can transcend into the spiritual, the metaphysical, the subconscious, and the dream world. And in that vein, with this Piscean energy that we're navigating, I had a really beautiful session with a client, and I was giving her this message that I feel in the collective for so many people too, which is that right now, the path forward feels really foggy and really uncertain. It's like we have these feelings of what we want to move forward with. We might have dreams, we might have a little bit of momentum for one step or another. But overall, there's this sense of a lot of question marks, a lot of fog, and the details aren't coming in super crisp. And this client said something that was so beautiful. She said, I just need to match my angels in the what happens next. So it's instead of being like, okay, I need my game plan and my 5-year plan and to know every single thing and the how and the why and the when and the what, just match your angels in the what happens next. I couldn't say that any better. Like, okay, I feel like it's time for new energetic strategies. I want to try something a little new. This is my impulse. Okay, I'm going to sit with my inner child in a way that I never have before and journal what she wants me to know. Okay, then what happens next? And the next step is always revealed. The next breadcrumb is always revealed. We're leaning into what happens next and how can I co create with them in this magical space. And this leads me to this really interesting download that I got as I was showering. And then I forgot to write it down. And then I forgot it. And then I had to sit in my meditation chair to remember it again. I was like, oh my gosh, I felt so grateful that I remembered it again. But it was this message of the universe. And I want to put a little disclaimer on this because I think there's no oversimplifying the universe. And sometimes when we try to distill energetic laws with the universe into clean, neat boxes, it's like sanitizing out some of the chaos that the universe has. So I don't think there's any one way to like distill it down. But this is just an idea to think about and a prompt to approach with playful curiosity, as with everything. So I got this message basically, like in the form of a lot of painful memories in my life, where it's like those painful memories have led to my biggest sort of up level and expansion and growth and power. But the feeling I got was like, but why does it have to be that way? Why can't I learn from the love, the joy, and the expansion in the same way as the pain, the loss, the grief, and the uncertainty? And basically, the feeling I got was because the universe is a mirror and I'm teaching it energetically that that's the only way I learn because I'm focusing on it, I'm looking for it, I'm dwelling on it. So then I like went a little deeper and I was like, okay, well, why is that? And basically, I got the feeling like, well, a part of our brain is literally designed to only notice that from a survival mode place. It's like the kind of principle of when you get a million nice comments on something, which has never happened to me, a million. Wow, calm down. But, let's say for an example, you get a million nice comments on something and 3 mean ones. Our brain will automatically focus on the 3 mean ones. We will replay it. We'll only think about it. We'll cry about it instead of being super lit up about the hypothetical million nice ones. And that's just the way we're designed from a biological perspective of needing community to survive and survival of the fittest. And I think that the next evolution of consciousness involves us inverting the way we're teaching the universe to treat us. So, my little asterisk with this is that this is a super distilled energetic principle when in reality, there's a difference between individual manifestation and group manifestation. And we can't control how the universe treats us on a collective level because that's a group manifestation. So, that's like people who are in these war torn countries. It's like, I'm not telling them to just focus on the good. Like that's a group manifestation. And that's the reason that this can't fully apply to everything. But to a certain level, on the individual level, we can implement this. And where are we trained to look for lack? Where are we trained to look for what's disappointing us, for what's missing, for what isn't working? Because the universe is mirroring that right back to us in a way that only makes us learn from that. It's like, okay, if their attention is going to be so streamlined on the lack, then I guess I'll use the lack to teach them their lessons. Instead, how can we lean into what's feeling good right now? What are you grateful for? What is aligned? And at first, we might have to fake it till we make it because literally on the brain level, that doesn't feel right to us. It's like, no, but how can I achieve more? How can I strive for more? How can I compare myself to this image of success and get more, more, more? And the universe is like, oh, okay, well, okay, I guess we are still focusing on what we don't have and more, more, more. Okay, I'll always keep you wanting more because I'm just a mirror. So basically, we're in this era now where the evolution of consciousness involves expansion through love, focusing on love. And in a similar way, like it brings me to this memory of when I was in this acting class, and one of our exercises was standing in the mirror and saying, I am beautiful, so that we could walk into auditions with confidence. And when I first did that exercise, I couldn't even say it. I was sobbing. I was like so insecure. I never thought I was beautiful. I was severely bullied. I was asked out as a joke. I was called the ugliest girl in our school when I was young. I had such awful things. I was a very late bloomer and it did a number on me. And it literally didn't feel authentic to call myself beautiful in the mirror. And now I'm like, I love myself. I am beautiful. Like, it's completely healed. And so I think it'll be a similar energetic principle to this idea, where at first it's like, this feels a little difficult. Like, here's the thing, it doesn't feel safe to our nervous system to focus on what's going right. It feels like, but if I focus on what's going right, like, what if I don't survive? What if I don't take care of myself? And it's similar to the inner villain voice, where it's like, don't worry, I hear you and I've got you, and I'm a version of self that can handle both. This is a next level of self trust, allowing yourself to shift focus onto what is working, what is lighting you up, and allowing that to be the roadmap that leads you into matching the what happens next, as that beautiful client said. So I was, again, so distressed when I thought I lost that download because while I was showering, I was like, oh my God, this changes everything. So before I go on, is there anything you want to say, Claire?
I love that so much, and it's so true. We have a negativity bias for survival. It's if there's a basket full of 100 kittens and a cobra, it is important to notice the cobra, and you do need to be focused on that cobra. But we've translated that into many aspects of our life that don't involve snakes or actual danger. It's more of a concept of danger or a concept of fear that could hurt us. And yeah, I mean, what a powerful thing. I think we often talk about, oh, hard things can help us grow and expand. And I think that's a beautiful silver lining of hard things. And what a powerful shift to think that we can also focus on, obviously, when we think about it, the love we've received has, of course, made us better, has, of course, like pushed us to be an even better version of ourselves. So, yeah, I'm absolutely loving that and going to focus on that this week and try and notice in small ways how I can look to those things to help me grow and expand into my best self.
Yeah, I love that so much. And I love the metaphor of the kittens and the cobra. It's so true. And it really breaks it down in that way. So, yeah, I think we are constantly pushing ourselves to get out of our comfort zone, which is a good thing. But how can we do that with things that we love? And I think that the answer is bravery, like taking things to the next level. And that actually ties in with when I tuned into our angels. One of the very first thing that came up was that we are in a moment where I start to get these kind of anxious butterfly feelings in our solar plexus chakra, where it's like we're trying new energetic strategies in a way that scare us a little bit. It's like overcoming these little dysregulating, fearful twitters of butterflies in our stomach and just being like, oh my gosh, okay, I'm going to publish this essay. I'm going to put it out online. Or, oh my gosh, okay, I'm going to just say yes to this blind date. It's like doing things that we would have never done before that scare us a little, that feel a little uncomfortable. And that to me feels like the way we up level through love, because that is like leaning into trust, leaning into, okay, meet me with what comes next, and saying yes to giving momentum to our angels. And so, rewinding, the very first thing that came through from our angels was throat chakra expansion. And it felt like almost constriction led to expansion. And it's noticing what we feel so uncomfortable to talk about or acknowledge, because throat chakra isn't just about expressing ourselves to others, although that is a big part of it. It's also about lying to ourselves or radically honest with ourselves. So, where do we feel the constriction and the resistance and the ickiness? And then how can we expand past that in a braver way? And like the truth will set you free, as they say. That led me to this feeling of like warmth and magic and expansion. I feel like we're in this ripe moment for a lot of beauty and magic and miracles and all of these good things. And it's leading us to like these new energetic strategies where it's like, okay, I feel a little stale in some area. I know what I love. I know what excites me. What would scare me a little bit? Because that thing, whether it's like taking an improv class or doing karaoke, it's like that thing that scares you a little bit is what will help you grow, will help you build trust with yourself, help you break old barriers of thinking and comfort zones. And it almost feels like this adrenaline rush that propels you into the next chapter. So, things that like give us a little bit of adrenaline rush, not to say like an adrenaline junkie, but things that scare us a little bit feels in alignment with the energy right now, like being brave. And then I got the message from your angels that felt like tough love, but also made me laugh. And it was like, enough talking about it, do it. And that's like the other part of this too is like, you've been talking about it, you've been planning, you've been getting opinions. It's like, just do it. And that's part of the energy of pushing past the fear a little bit, even though it feels scary. And then they showed me an image of this like big ship sailing through scary dark waters at night. And that's sometimes how the energy feels, where it's like there is nothing scarier to me than the ocean at night. But the world is what, 80% ocean or something? We have to be able to traverse the ocean at night. It's so scary. And so the ship is like our toolbox, it's our preparation. We've loaded it with cargo, we've hoisted the sails. Let the sails be our intentions, let the sails be our soul growth, let the sails be what the heart is asking for. The wind is spirit pushing it forward. We can't control that. We can only control the ship, but the ship is equipping us to glide over the dark waters. So we might be in a moment where it feels like we're navigating scary or unknown territory, but basically, this is a long winded way of your angels saying you're prepared. Stay in connection with what's in your control, which is the cargo, the sails, maintaining the ship, taking care of the ship. The wind and the water is not in your control. That being said, I want to get into the mediumship now. So, I did have a gentleman in spirit coming in, and immediately he was showing me pain in his stomach. So, I felt like there was something going on in his stomach. He felt in his 40s or 50s to me. He was brunette. I saw cars as being really important to him. And then I saw two flags crossed, like racing or NASCAR, motocross, like something about like fast cars, racing, something like that. I did feel like this would be somebody's uncle. And then I also got this feeling like for the last part of his life, he would have been either unresponsive or in a coma. He showed me drinking and chewing tobacco and not really taking the best care of his body. And he showed me that he was with a sister in spirit, or someone that felt like a sister who would have been younger than him. He was also with a dog that had really long, like kind of droopy ears. And he was bringing me to the South. So I feel like he would have been in like the Southern United States. And there were two parts to his message. One is he was showing me that he was not a good listener, and I feel like he would have even had trouble hearing. Like he felt deaf to me and like you would have had to shout at him. And that's part of the message is like I was never a good listener and I wish I would have listened a little bit more, been a little bit more open. That was like a side message. But the main message from him was that even spirits who you think would be the least likely people on the other side to support you and love you and take sending you signs seriously are taking it seriously, are supporting you, are hearing you. Because he gives me this feeling of like my like loved ones in spirit would be like, "Oh, uncle blah 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 would never send us signs or be into this stuff or care." He's like, "No, no, 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 no. Like from this consciousness on the other side, I see it differently." So there's a message here when it comes to signs from your loved ones, not to over identify with the stories of who they were when they were here, even if they were religious, even if they were like, I don't believe in all of this. Our perspective changes when we're on the other side. And even the most like burly, gruff, unresponsive, bad listener ancestor on the other side will still try to support you, show you that you're supported, and facilitate healing. And I just found that message to be very simple and very sweet.
Yeah, I love that. I think it shows the difference between our human experience and the energy that we become or connect back to when we're in spirit. It's like there's no petty energy in spirit, or at least it seems that way. It's all love and it's more of a deeper knowing. So where people maybe fell short in life or weren't able to show up in the way that they maybe best could, that is an awareness, it seems, on the other side.
Exactly. And that's what's so funny too. It's like today in a mediumship reading right before we connected, she had these like precious grandparents on the other side that she really wanted to hear from. And I was like, okay, great. Let me try to reach them. And who came through but her like gruff grandpa that was really difficult when he was here and had problems with his wife and his daughter and was mean to his son and had all these problems. And it's like sometimes that's what happens because they're the ones that have the most pressing message to get through. Whereas your sweet grandma is like, go ahead, Grandpa Bill, like you go first because she knows I love her. We left on good terms. She knows my signs to her. I visited her in a dream. It's not as urgent for me to get through this information as it is for you. And so sometimes in the spirit world, they'll literally like step aside or like ramp up to get somebody to you that is like the least expected person. I had a really funny client who was like, "Why is he here?" When like somebody came through. She's like, "What the heck is he doing here?" But he had the really important message about like divorce and separation and how he wished he was a better husband that tied into what she was going through. So sometimes there's a lot of surprises, but nothing that the spirit world does is arbitrary. They're coming up for a reason. Usually, their struggles or themes or cycle breaking have something to do with what you're navigating in some way. So, always look for the parallels in that because the spirit world is so intelligent. It seems silly and lighthearted when I break things down, but it's not. They are so intelligent, and the layers of how their information is so perfect in the way it connects with us in this current moment, exactly what we need to hear, and how the evidence comes through is not arbitrary. And so when things come through and it surprises you, let yourself sit with that in a while. Like, why would this grandpa come up? And how is that helpful for me today? And it might just be, like I said, that your other relatives know they're on good terms with you and that there's nothing that so desperately needs to come through. But it might also be other reasons too. And just knowing that there's always a reason for the way things unravel when it comes to the spirit world.
Yeah, and kind of goes back to that thing of like meeting it in that next moment. It's this is what needs to come through and just meeting it in that moment and allowing it to show you what needs to happen or what you need to hear. I also just really loved what you said about the ship and preparing. And it's just what popped into my head was like, there's no point of a ship unless it goes onto the water. You've built the ship and you stocked that ship and you're in the harbor, and now, like, the point of the ship is to sail onto the waters, and so you've done the preparation. Now you're ready to set sail knowing that the voyage itself will be so beneficial even if it doesn't get you to where you think it's sending you. It's like, it's so great to prepare, and then it's so great to take that leap even when it's scary because we benefit so much from the doing, even though that's the scary part.
Yeah, voyages take bravery, period. I just love what you just said. It's so true. Like, what is the point of having a crew, equipping things, spending all the money on the voyage? You will have to go over dark water. You will have to travel at night. You will have to traverse thick fogs and crazy waves. But what's the alternative? Staying tied at your dock forever? Bravery is required of anything worthwhile. And so I think that that's just so beautiful. And when it comes to meeting them in that next moment, when it comes to mediumship, that's like a secret hack to becoming a well developed medium. It's like not letting your mind be like, what's the point of this? And what's the whole story? And why are they showing me this? It's like literally following the power is a roadmap for living authentically as well and living in flow with spirit as well, where it's like, the power, which is a shorthand for basically the spirit world that co creates with us, like we call it sitting in the power in the spiritualist community. And when you're a medium, it's like, okay, I'm flowing over here. This spirit is telling me things. Oh, the power's moving over here and a grandma's stepping in. But then your brain is like, wait. I should be with the grandpa and I should still be saying, but it's like, no. The power's coming in. It's taking you over here. You have to follow the power in the present moment. Then maybe you'll go back. You just have to follow where you're being led and be in flow that way. And I think that's the mediumship spirit world version of matching them in the what happens next. And that's really all we can do. Matching them in the what happens next. Like we've prepared the ships, we've hoisted the sails, we have the cargo. Embark and match them in the what happens next. We're ready.
Yes, exactly. I'm feeling that so deeply too. I've got many things that I want to do. It's like, okay, well, go do it.
Mm.
It's time to do it.
Exact. Going back to that tough love message of like, enough talking about it, just do it.
Exactly. Yeah.
I love that. I feel that too. There have been so many things. And to our credit, we're kind of in the part of the year as of recording that is more about the internal yin, restful, meditative energy. But we just passed through February 1st, February 2nd, where it's like, okay, we're halfway to the spring equinox and we're starting to get a little momentum and we're starting to get a little bit more fire. And the days are going to start to get a little longer and things are going to come into bloom again soon. And things are starting to pick up a little bit now.
Yeah, exactly. I feel it. I know it's only February, but here in LA, it feels like spring has sprung. It's like all these trees are in bloom, and maybe it's just my internal feeling, but I'm feeling that energy of, okay, let's get after it.
Yeah, I feel that too. And I feel like because I rested so hard in create spaciousness, I can, which I'm very grateful for.
Yeah, that's such a good lesson.
I also just want to point out really quickly that as of time of recording, Jupiter just went direct again in Gemini. And Jupiter is like luck and expansion and writing and speaking and teaching. And this is like a social planet. So we're not going to feel it so on the individual level. But if you're somebody with heavy Gemini energy, you'll feel it. But also, if you're somebody with heavy influence in a more public way, because it's a social planet, if your work impacts large groups of people, you might feel it a little bit more too. And today I felt it so strongly. I was like, I want to write and I have so many things to share and I have so many downloads coming in. And like when I wasn't in that space, I was so scared that I'd never be in that space again. Like, not really to a level because I have faith and I observe the patterns, but I noticed and witnessed those fears coming up in me, like trying to force the expansion, trying to force what's next, trying to force the creative flow. But just being in rest and recuperation allowed me to get to a place where I could facilitate that flow again. And like feeling the tap turn back on today was really exciting for me.
Yeah, I totally relate to that. It's hard in those moments where you don't feel it flowing and you feel like I've lost it forever, but trusting in those cycles. It's like even going back to the ocean analogy. It's so funny how like during the day I love the ocean and then at night I'm like nightmare. And that's an example of like the ocean is not one or the other. The ocean is existing and then I'm having this experience of it feeling like open and exciting and then terrifying. And we are constantly in that like ebb and flow of life as it shifts and then comes back around. And so, the ocean isn't always scary. And so if you're in a moment where you're in that fear stuff with yourself or not in a flow state, it's like, okay, that's just like a rest state then.
And that connects back to that Pisces energy that we were talking about in the beginning, where it's like sometimes that spiritual connection, Pisces, which is represented by the ocean, is in flow and is light filled and does feel really good. But then it's not always our best interest to be floating in those spaces. Like when the waters are dark and it's nighttime, it's like, okay, that's where the duality exists. Not everything is for us always. And we have to be okay with the duality. And I just want to say really quickly before we end that thinking of the beach and the ocean at night reminds me of that one birthday party we had of yours at the beach, and that guy was naked in the ocean. He like appeared out of nowhere and was naked walking through the waves. And we were so taken aback. And we kept trying to like move the party away. And he kept floating in the water, like closer to us. And I was like, okay, this is why you can't be at the beach at night.
Yes, he was trying to be seen. It was very weird and bizarre, but also hilarious. Yeah, the naked man.
He was like slowly marching through the waves as if he was like on a Tyra Banks runway. I was like, what are you doing, sir?
It takes that second too. You're like, oh, there's that guy. Wait a minute. Is that a fully naked man? Yes, it is.
I went from being like, "What an inspiration. Oh, he's naked. Okay, I actually don't think he's an inspiration anymore. I'm actually scared of him."
Yeah. So if you're at Santa Monica Beach at night, beware. There's a guy who takes his clothes off and exposes himself. There may be many, but look out.
Ain't that just the way? So, anyway, I love you all so much. We'll end it with something funny, but I hope these messages were helpful for you guys. I think that this February listener questions episode is full of so much information. It might have to be one of those episodes that you listen to a couple times, but I know that whatever sticks out to you is what you're meant to hear. So, let's just leave it with that. I hope that you guys have a beautiful week, and we'll see you next week.
For more information on Taylor and her work, go to angelsandamethyst.com or connect with her on Instagram at angels_and_amethyst. She is the one verified account with this name and will never DM you for a reading. If you have any questions about intuition, spirituality, angels, or anything and everything magical, please email contact@magichourpod.com. We will answer listener questions once a month in our solo episodes. Are you an aligned business owner that would like to advertise to our beautiful hummingbird community? Please email contact@magichourpod.com. Make sure you're subscribing to Magic Hour so you never miss the magic. And don't forget to leave us 5 sparkling star reviews. They help more magical people find the pod. Please screenshot and email your 5-star reviews to contact@magichourpod.com, and we'll send you a free downloadable angelic meditation and enter you to win an angel reading with Taylor Page. If you review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, we'll add your name twice. And if you share the podcast on your Instagram story and tag us, we'll add your name a 3rd time. The next giveaway will happen when we hit 222 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.
Thank you for listening to Magic Hour with Taylor Page. Remember, you are magic.